Alright you guys, let's go ahead and get started. This tutorial is a little bit long, so we're going to jump right into it, starting off with a few supplies. You're going to need some paper to draft your pattern. I like to use freezer paper, but you can use pattern paper or whatever paper you like. Scissors, Wonder tape, I like to use this for my hems. Marking utensils, some marking chalk, pencil, Sharpie, etc. A ruler or a yardstick, measuring tape, thread, and pins. For your fabric, you want to use a medium weight knit fabric, and today I'll be using Ponte. You want to make sure you know which way your fabric stretches. If you notice, when I pull the fabric along the selvage, there's not a lot of stretch to it. However, when I turn it the other way, you'll see that there is a good bit of stretch. So you want to make sure that you pay attention to the diagrams throughout this tutorial, which will show you which way to lay your fabric and which way to place your pattern on top of your fabric. Most sewing machines have a variety of stitches available on them, and these are the stitches on my machine. The most common stitch used for sewing stretch fabric would be a zigzag stitch, and that's number 3 on my machine. And there's also a triple stretch stitch, which is number 14 on my machine. My favorite way to sew with stretch fabric is using my twin needle. If you guys would like a tutorial on how to thread your machine and use this needle, definitely leave a comment down below and I'll be happy to make one for you. I like to use this stitch, 1, because I don't have a serger and it gives me a nice finished look, and 2, I noticed a lot of times there can be issues with slippage and with your threads breaking or snapping when you use other stitches, and this helps alleviate that. You can see this is what it looks like, and you have quite a bit of stretch in your fabric. Now we're going to go ahead and start drafting some pattern pieces, and I'm going to show you 3 different ways. Method number 1. This is definitely the easiest out of all 3 and great for beginners. All you need is a shirt that you don't mind cutting, and you're going to mark from your neckline down to where you want the bottom of your waist to be, and then you'll mark a line for your waistband. You'll cut out 2 pieces, making sure that you leave enough room for your seam allowance. The second method, you're actually going to draft your pattern, and please excuse my terrible drawing here. You want to go ahead and mark a straight line down the center of your pattern paper. You're going to measure your neckline and mark that on your paper. Then you're going to measure from your neckline down to your waist, or where you want the top of your waistband to sit. Measure your waist at that point and mark that onto your pattern paper. Next, you're going to measure the width of your back, which is going to be the widest part of your bag. And then you're going to measure from your neckline down to the width of your bag, and then go ahead and mark your width measurement on your pattern paper. Measure your shoulder. Then you're going to measure a second waist measurement about 2.5 inches below your first waist measurement. You'll go ahead and mark that on your pattern paper. Connect your measurements. Fold your pattern along the first line you drew. And you can go ahead and mark your seam allowance. Once you've done that, you can cut out your pattern and you have completed your top pattern piece. And now you can go ahead and mark your measurements for your back and front peplum, making sure to include your seam allowance. Method number 3, which is definitely the most common, you would just take a t-shirt and line that up on your pattern paper, fold it over nice and neat, and I like to pin it down just to make sure that it's accurate, and then you would go ahead and trace around your t-shirt. Use a pencil first and then go back in with your Sharpie so you can see your lines better. This is what your pattern piece should look like, and now you would go ahead and mark your measurement from your neckline to the bottom of your waistband. Then go ahead and mark your seam allowances going all the way around. This is the way that I like to mark my seam allowance. I take my measuring tape, and from each line I mark a dash, the length of my seam allowance, and then I just go ahead and connect the lines, and I would repeat this all the way around. And this is what your pattern piece will end up looking like. I'm using the same pattern piece for the front and the back. So for the front, I just measured down about 3 inches and drew a curve up to my shoulder. Go ahead and cut this piece out, and now you have your front neckline and front pattern piece, and you can just tape that piece back on when you're ready to make your back. Now we'll go ahead and start working on your waistband pattern, and I mark a line about 2.5 inches up because that's how wide I want my waistband to be. Lay your paper on top and start tracing around that measurement. I'm just going to trace around and use all of the seam allowance markings that I already have. This way it's easier and I don't have to do all of the measurements again. Once you've done that, you can go ahead and mark your dashes for your seam allowance and cut your pattern piece out. While cutting mine out, I decided to go ahead and mark a triangle on the top of the waistband so it'll be easier for me to line my waistband up with my bodice. Once you've cut that out, you'll see that it lines up perfectly with your original pattern piece. And you want to go ahead and mark your fold on your pattern. Now you're ready to put the seam allowance on your top bodice piece. And again, I'm just going to use measurements that I've already done on the waistband. Marking a dash on one side and on the other. Take your ruler and make sure you have a nice straight line and go ahead and place your mark. Make your dashes for your seam allowance. And then you can go ahead and cut it out. Now you should have two pattern pieces that line up perfectly on top of each other, which will complete your bodice pattern. I have two pieces of fabric folded over and pinned together, and then I lay my pattern on top of that along the fold. Go ahead and pin it down, and then you can cut it out. Once I've done that, I go ahead and remove my pins and remove the piece for my neckline in the front. Then pin it back down. Taking only the top layer of fabric, you're going to go ahead and cut out your mark. And you should have two pieces that look like this. You're going to go ahead and line the pieces up, pin them down, and you'll sew along the tops and the sides. And this is what your piece should look like. Next, we're going to do your waistband. I have one piece of fabric folded over, and you can see this is the direction of the stretch. And I'm going to fold it over again. Place your pattern piece on top along the fold. Pin it down and go ahead and cut it out. And you should end up with two pieces that look like this. Go ahead and line your pieces up, pin them down, and sew along each side. Now you're ready to attach your waistband to your bodice. Make sure that your bodice is turned the right side out, and your waistband will be turned inside out. Line your dashes up so that they're at the bottom. Tuck your bodice into your waistband. Go ahead and pin all the way around. And then sew all the way around. Once you've done that, this is what it should look like. When you unfold it, you'll see that you have the completed top bodice. Now you're ready to start taking measurements for your peplum. You want to measure the width of the bottom of your waistband. You're going to take that measurement and multiply it by 2, which will give you your A measurement. No matter what measurement you get, divide that by 6.28, and that will give you your B measurement. Take B and then multiply that by 2, and that will give you your final C measurement that you will use to mark along your fabric to measure your waistline. This is the same method I used in my circle skirt tutorial, and you can see I'm just moving my measuring tape around after I've placed each mark, making sure I keep my measuring tape lined up at the corner. You guys notice that I'm using a Sharpie. Definitely do not use a Sharpie, but I couldn't find my marking chalk, so I had to do what I had to do. Go ahead and connect your line, and now you can mark your front peplum measurement, making sure that you have included your seam allowance. Then make sure you mark that along the fold. And then go ahead and mark the back peplum measurement, and making sure to include your seam allowance. You'll go ahead and draw a line connecting those measurements. Once you've done that, this is what it should look like, and you're going to go ahead and cut your pattern piece out now. Sew along the open seams. And this is what it should look like. You're going to end up with one seam going down the back. You can leave it like this if you want to, or if you want to make it the same that I did, keep following. Mark a line about 2.5 inches from the top of your waistline for your peplum. Then trace over that. Mark where your seam allowance is because you don't want that additional seam allowance in this pattern. Trace around. Go ahead and mark your seam allowance. Now you have a complete pattern piece. Cut it out. And you can go ahead and set this aside. Then back on your fabric, you're going to mark your seam allowance. And then go ahead and cut along that line. Remove the additional fabric. Place your paper on top of that piece. Mark it and draw your seam allowance. You can use this pattern piece later on. Then taking the piece you made earlier, pin it down, cut it out, and this is what it should look like. You'll see that it lines up perfectly, and you're ready to start attaching your peplum. Pin all the way down. And you would sew down this line. Pin your other side down and sew along that line. I've already sewn it together, and now I'm just going to mark my front middle seam and my back middle seam while my fabric is folded. This is going to make it easier to line up your peplum with your bodice. Go ahead and line up those two marks. And now you can mark your two side seams. Now you're ready to attach your peplum to your bodice. Make sure that your peplum is folded inside out and your bodice is folded the right way. Tuck your bodice into your peplum. And I'm so sorry, you guys, my camera died, so I didn't get to show you this, but you do the same thing. You're just going to pin all the way around. And then once you've pinned all the way around, you're going to go ahead and sew all the way around. And this is what it should look like when you're done. And now you're ready to start working on your sleeves. For my sleeves, I took a shirt and made sure that my pattern piece lined up along the armhole curve. You can see it matches up perfectly here. Go ahead and take your shirt and line it up along the straight edge of your paper. Go ahead and pin it down to make sure it's nice and secure. And then fold the rest of the shirt over. And now you're going to start pinning down the armhole curve. You should end up with a bell curve that will look like this, and you're going to go ahead and trace around. Big thank you to Mommy's Little Helper there. I did add some additional length to my sleeve as well. And then go ahead and add in your seam allowance. Make sure you mark your seam allowance on your armhole and mark your fold. I've got 2 pieces of fabric folded over here. Go ahead and pin it down. Place your pattern on top along the fold. And I'm just showing you guys the stretch and the way I have it placed. Pin it all the way down, cut it out, and this is what you'll end up with. Two sleeves that look like this, and you can kind of see that bell curve at the top there. Before you sew your sleeves, you want to make sure that you do your wrist hem, and you can pin your fabric down, but I like to use the Wonder Tape here. Go ahead and place the Wonder Tape on your fabric. Peel the paper backing off, and then fold your fabric over using your measurement for your seam allowance. Take that to your sewing machine, and you're going to sew on the top of your fabric. And this is what it should look like. Once you've done that, you want to go ahead and fold your sleeves so that right sides are facing right sides. And then sew down. This is your finished sleeve. And now you're ready to attach it to your bodice. Make sure your bodice is inside out and your sleeve is turned the right way. Line up your bottom seams and go ahead and start pinning all the way around. Once you've done that, you'll go ahead and sew it all the way around, and this is what it should look like. Just work slowly when you're working around your curves. This is what it looks like on the inside, and I do go ahead and cut off the additional fabric just to make sure it lies nice and flat since I don't have a serger. Go ahead and fold your top the right way and hem your neckline, folding your fabric over once so that it's not too bulky. Do the same on the bottom, and I like to use the Wonder Tape here anytime I'm doing any sort of circle hem. And that's the finished product, you guys. If you'd like to see more pics, definitely check out the link for the outfit of the day post below. This is another look at the red top. And some of you asked for a double peplum tutorial. If you would like to see that, definitely leave your comments below. If you try out this tutorial, I would love to see your pics. Check out my other sewing and DIY tutorials. And don't miss out on this Instagram giveaway for pink boots. It ends tonight at midnight. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you have enjoyed this tutorial. Feel free to subscribe, comment, share, and give it a thumbs up. Until my next video, assalamu alaikum. Peace.